Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell movement.
Welcome to the Powell movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and this week I'm getting ready for a few weeks on the mic for work. Friday, I'll be at Evo for a movie night, and then the next 2 weeks, I'll be the MC of Snowvana, Seattle, and Portland. If you're at the Evo show or at Snowvana, come on up and say hello. I'd love to have an NA beer with you or a regular beer. Who knows what kind of mood I'll be in. I will say I need to keep myself busy these days, and I'm struggling when I'm not. I mean, losing the most important person in my life has been brutal, and witnessing the suffering was absolutely miserable. And then Ange died, and that was a good thing because the pain was over. But really, it was a terrible thing as well, because that's when a new, really painful life started for me and my son Keaton. One where we'll never see Ange again. And I'm having a really hard time with that. I'm so fucking lonely, and I just want that person that was so easy and comfortable to talk to. And that's who Ange was, and she's gone. I find myself talking to Ange every day, and I still find myself crying every day. It's only been a little over 3 months, and I wonder how long this broken feeling will last. And I've tried therapy, and that really wasn't doing it for me. Sometimes just sharing things here makes me feel better, and it's because I can say something and I don't have anybody to say anything back, and I feel like I need that at some points, because when people try to talk to Ange about me, that's when I get really upset. What doesn't make me feel better is all the reminders. I mean, I went to that Mariners baseball game, which was so boring, by the way, and the dude sitting 5 rows behind us, he was another friend who recently lost his wife. It's like wherever I go, things remind me of Ange. I go to the mailbox. And there's always something about a grief survey from the hospital that they want me to do. And it's like, fuck you. Ange is dead, and I'm not doing your stupid paperwork just so I can cry again. The one good thing, which I always thought was a bad thing, was that Ange didn't ski. So hopefully, when I get to the mountains, I won't be thinking about Ange the whole time, and it won't be all sad because that was a place that she wasn't comfortable. I mean, I'm so sick of being upset, but I can't stop it. What else I can't stop is podcasting, because I'm going to deliver one badass interview a week until I get to 500. And I can't promise anything more than 500 episodes because that's been a goal for a long time. And this week, it's a full-on business episode with one of the smartest, most driven guests I've had to date. Jamie Starr is a skier, a head of marketing, a wizard at the desk, and a people connector. And he's had some of the best jobs in snow. Think Spyder, DPS, The North Face, Backcountry.com, and now the National Ability Center. His story is as interesting as business episodes get. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to tell a friend about the show. Since I'm not an important athlete or a personality that has a built-in audience, I'm just a podcaster who out-researches and out-interviews all those people. So yeah, telling your friend about the show really does help it grow. And I know when I say shit like that, I sound totally cocky. But if you listen to shows like mine, you know I go above and beyond what it takes to deliver an incredible show. I do this all for you and to tell these great stories. I hope you like it this week, and I hope you listen to my sponsor ads and buy their products as well, as they really do make this show happen. And this week, Thermic is back as a sponsor, and they're going to keep your feet from freezing off this winter in the mountains. I mean, this brand invented the heated sock, so please check them out, as well as my other amazing sponsors, Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Now, it's time to chat with Jamie Starr. You're a force when it comes to cause-based desk jockeys in action sports, but you were unemployed for almost 2 years. First, how did you find out that you had no job or that you were losing your job?
That's a good one to kick it off with. Desk jockey for sure. As for your other question, it's been quite a journey. The short answer is I was part of a RIF. I was part of a reorganization at the North Face, but in a larger sense at VF Corporation.
But that was 2 jobs ago, right? Didn't you have a job at Backcountry?
Yeah, and then about a year later, I found myself in a role as the head of brand marketing for Backcountry.com here in Park City. And about 5 months into that role, a very similar thing went down, and I found myself, as you said, for a second time in 2 years without a role. After having worked my tail off for decades and ascended the ranks in the outdoor and snow sports industries and feeling quite fragile at that moment in time. Both times, I should say.
With Backcountry, you're stoked that you have this new dream job and you do a few months. It's like they pretty much have you package the company and get it ready to sell Did you see you were selling the company and selling your job at the same time?
I mean, the backcountry one, I guess I was less surprised. Backcountry is, had been private equity owned for a lot of years and hadn't been acquired for, I think, the previous 7 or 8 years. And in private equity parlance, that's a very long time horizon to own a brand asset or a business unit like that. So I was less surprised there. I hadn't had the same amount of time to really establish myself in that role and really honestly have an opportunity to make an impact. So that one felt super disappointing, but less heavy than what happened with the North Face, where I was for 4 years in a leadership role and made a lot of lifelong friendships and connections with my colleagues and with our global athlete team and partners. And, I'm one of those people who I go into a role and I really become one with the brand, as it were. That's always been my MO when I go and work with brands is, my job is to really humanize that brand and create a connective brand message out there that resonates with consumers and with stakeholders. So I take that seriously and I really put a lot of my personal self into that. And so when you spend 4 years doing exactly that, and then all of a sudden it's over and it comes as a surprise and it has nothing to do with your performance and just has something to do with what the larger global enterprise is undergoing out there, it's pretty tough.
I can imagine it's pretty tough, but in just thinking about it, like you've had some of the best jobs over the years and your education is like smarter than anybody else in the industry almost. And when you look at it and you get let go at both those jobs, but with backcountry, it seemed like you were out of work for like 2 years, maybe looking for the right role. Maybe it was a tough job market, but does your self-esteem take a hit? Even though you're this badass heavy hitter who's smarter than everybody else, when you can't get a job, does it bum you out personally?
It definitely bums you out because we're just human here. But I think what comes up for me when we talk about this is really the opportunity to reframe and to make a choice for yourself. And in this case, it's not just about myself, it's about myself and my family, about how you deal with those setbacks and how you learn from those setbacks and how you move forward. They say fail forward, right? And there's so much truth to that. But this other thing that I think about is ego. And in the early parts of my career, I think I was driven a lot by my own ego and my desire to go and achieve and have those awesome roles with the best brands and what that really portrayed to the world. And ultimately, that was driven, I think, by my desire to be respected and accepted. And I've always just been someone who wants to help people and want to have a nice brand platform through which I can help people and advance worthy causes and bring business success. Now, I just turned 45 last Sunday.
Happy birthday.
And thank you so much. And I'm feeling a lot more like I have more perspective now about, hey, it's not about me. It's not about my perception out there in the marketplace. It's not about how many likes I get when I put a LinkedIn post up. It's really about the life that I want to lead and the life I want to give my kids. And so I feel really proud of how I've continued to navigate that part of it and just feel really lucky. But a lot of that was also not luck. It was me working very intentionally with my wife, Lily, on a plan for ourselves and our family to live in the mountains like we were so lucky to have as kids growing up from Crested Butte. She's from Sun Valley. And that's a really important thing, that we're going to raise our kids in a mountain community and give them opportunities that we had growing up. So that's what I can feel proud of. And then the future is bright. So.
Well, you bring up Crested Butte and growing up, and you got so deep there, and there were so many questions I was going to probe into, but I just kind of let you talk there because it was all really good stuff. And it kind of goes into like, you're saying that you wanted to do good and really do good, not only doing good and wanting to have the best education, do the best in school and be better than everybody else. Maybe that wasn't your thought process, but you're going to outwork everybody. And when you look at who your dad was, he's a lawyer, but he's like a do-gooder lawyer who wants to make a difference in the world. And he's also one of those overachievers where like in college, he's going to be the class president in college. And then he's going to go be on like every board and everything he can possibly do in Crested Butte to make a difference in the community. And you grew up with that, like a do-good dad, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Like my parents were super formative, of course, like every parent is to a kid. But that whole story starts back in mid 70s in Amherst, Massachusetts, where my parents met at an anti-war rally. My dad had finished up law school in Boulder and had moved to Amherst to start the first student legal services office at UMass. And my mom was an undergrad. Those were the Dr. J years. She was literally in Dr. J's class at UMass. And they met and eventually like migrated back out west to where, my dad had grown up in Fort Collins, and they came through Crested Butte. And that was a time in Crested Butte's history when this is a coal mining community. And so that was the heritage of Crested Butte until the early to mid 70s when, some free-spirited folks, you might call them hippies, moved to town. And there was also a big mine that was trying to establish itself just outside of town, just to the west on Red Lady or Mount Emmons. Those names can be used interchangeably. So what these like-minded community members found themselves dealing with is sort of an existential crisis of, hey, we all love this community and we want to build families here and thrive, but we have proposed mine right at the outskirts of our town. It would threaten our water supply. The list goes on. It would transform the community for the negative. And so they all banded together and they were successful in pushing that mine out. And so my parents both sort of assumed leadership roles within the community starting very early. And then over the years, although my parents did get divorced, my dad stayed there locally and is still there and is still super involved. But yeah, that was something that was really formative for me. And it really, I guess, informed what I would end up doing in my career. And then I realized I wasn't going to take the same path that my dad did to do good. I had my own path to do that, and definitely had like setbacks along the way and like big transitions to overcome and to navigate. But I'm feeling pretty good about where things are right at this moment.
You pretty much did the exact same thing as your dad. You went to law school, you got some jobs that you wanted, you decided you and your wife made a plan to move to the mountains for your kids. Same thing, your kid's probably going to do the same thing. That's great. Did you make your kid do Taekwondo like your dad did, where you guys got into it and it was something you guys did together and then you pushed on through to be a black belt?
It's funny because like my dad, we affectionately call him the commish, because he was like a 3-term Gunnison County commissioner. And the commish is like one of the most easygoing, likable guys you'll ever meet. But as a dad, he did put healthy pressure on me to succeed and be my best in a variety of ways. I was a super serious student. I remember he would give me $1 for each A I got on my report card. And although that would only amount to like $13 a quarter, that was enough incentive for me to really try hard and get straight A's. You had mentioned Taekwondo. It was actually Shotokan karate, and I started studying it at 4 years old. And by the time I was 11 years old, I had earned my black belt and became the first person in Crested Butte to ever earn a black belt. There was a lot of like early years achievement, and I think a lot of that came from a recipe of some healthy pressure and incentives from my dad. And it was fun, but it was a intense childhood at times.
So you're not this big guy in life. And is there a quiet confidence knowing that if some meathead kind of bumps up against you in a bar and then gets pissed at you, like that you could take him down?
Honestly, I don't know, because anyone who's studied martial arts will probably tell you like the first teaching in martial arts is about how to avoid conflict. And so I'm a pacifist, and I would say even moreover, I'm someone who will actively go out of my way to facilitate a peaceful resolution. That's the role that I've really assumed in my adult life.
But you're not afraid to go into one of those conflict situations where it's going to be dangerous because you know you can handle yourself?
Yeah, to a certain limit, though. I would just say that I'm usually one of the first people to stand up for the underdog. If I sense that someone's being bullied, I will do what I believe to be the right, sort of course to address that and support that underdog and try to avoid conflict, because let's be honest, nothing good ever comes from a fight.
No, it doesn't. I've never been in one, so I wouldn't know. I was punched once and it really sucked. But whatever, that guy
Oh, yeah.
got suspended. I didn't. But you grew up in a
Yeah.
place, Crested Butte, that is awesome for so many different reasons. But one of them, when you were a kid, the X Games were there, and it was like the beginning of the X Games in Crested Butte. How cool was that for you guys?
I mean, the X Games was amazing. I remember I was a freshman at CU Boulder by the time the X Games got there, but
Okay.
that was the culmination of the previous 10 years when like Steve and Murray from Matchstick moved to town from
Yeah,
the
because you have
Pacific
the whole,
Northwest.
you have the extreme movement before the X Games.
Yeah, totally. And like even before Steve and Murray and Matchstick and the whole, like everyone knows that story of like the change and evolution of skiing. But before that, it was like Allison Gannett, and she was my ski coach, and Dave Swanwick, and some of like the early like extreme skiers who were there. And I remember racing in a downhill. Crested Butte had one of the fastest, most challenging downhills on the circuit, and I was an alpine ski racer. And I remember chatting with Allison and Swanee in the finish after, I'd done pretty well in this downhill. And they sort of planted the seed of like, hey, we want to build like a dev program for young athletes who want to go ski big mountain. And big mountain skiing, extreme skiing, free ride, whatever you want to call it, started to be a thing. And so a lot of brands were looking to like build pipelines of young talent. And I remember having that chat with them of like, they're like, yeah, you want to like switch? You want to come compete next year? And I was like, my sights are set on college, and that's going to be my priority. And that's the path I took. But, that era was super formative because my birthday is September 14th, and it used to fall like on the day that Matchstick would world premiere their film at the Center for the Arts. And it was just like a huge part of our culture in Crested Butte. And as kids, like we were so stoked about everything that we were seeing. And, when Seth Morrison he was in town because he was a student at Western State College, and he started ripping around with his fluorescent pink hair, and he was just the talk of the town. And we were sort of the little Groms who were following him around. And luckily, no one died trying to chase him down like Fredos or something. Whether it was Seth or like my ski coaches who were awesome free skiers themselves, we were lucky to have like really great mentors and some of the best skiers in the world to follow. So I would say that was also formative for me of like, if you really think about where my career's gone, there's sort of a red thread there about my exposure to that culture and that early, free ski talent pool that again was like, really influential.
You come from a place where, I don't know if you knew it at the time, but it was looked at terrain-wise, it's looked at as a gnarly mountain. Is there a kind of a pride that you take when people come to Crested Butte and ski it and they're like, holy shit, this place is real? And you're like, yeah, this is what I grew up with.
Totally, right? And like what comes to mind too is when I was a kid, it used to snow a shit ton there. Like now with climate change, we just don't have those heavy winters. And so that is a mountain that if it doesn't have snow, it's so challenging because it's one big scree field. And so like, I guess from a young age, you learn how to survive, and it becomes this inborn instinct or skill that you develop as a young Grom shredding around Crested Butte of just like self-preservation and how to like make it out of that day alive. But there were lots of stories of like, myself and my friends finding ourselves like fully cliffed out over 80 footers, and just the harrowing stories of how we got out of there. Like after we had watched one of our coaches like hurl themselves off and like hip check a rock in the landing. And like, I just remember there were so many gnarly scenarios as a kid, and maybe that was a good thing, but sort of just glad to survive my childhood there.
And another part of your childhood was the Crested Butte Ski Academy. And I think it's a boarding school. Did you board or were you like a day student?
We didn't have a high school. The last time there was a high school was like kind of decades before when the mine was still open. And so for years, kids were getting bused from Crested Butte down to Gunnison, where Western State College is. And I was sort of like at that age where, I was gonna, so my parents divorced, and when my mom got remarried, she actually moved down to Gunnison. So I actually went to like 7th and 8th grade at a different school down in Gunnison, which was great because I got to meet all kinds of new friends and just be part of a different environment and a different community. But then by the time I was a freshman in high school, this guy, George Rao, who had been a headmaster at Burke Mountain Academy in Vermont, came to Crested Butte and with a lot of support from local families, started the Crested Butte Academy. It was a hybrid model. So you could either be a boarding student, but I was a day student. So it was kind of like voucher style. I got to use dollars that had been earmarked for me from the public school system to offset my tuition expense. So I was lucky. I got to go to like private, ski academy and have great teachers and awesome education and ski 6 days a week. We would get out at 11:30, Monday through Friday to go ski. We'd ski and train all afternoon. So, I mean, talk about the gravy train, right?
And then you got to go home and you didn't have to experience all the weird stuff that happens at those ski academies. What's the weirdest or grossest or story that you shouldn't tell?
Oh, there's so many gnarly things that happened in those early years. It was like Lord of the Flies in the dorms there. And there were so many talented and smart kids who went to school there, but there were also a few kids who, had behavioral problems at their previous schools. And, their parents kind of sent them there because they thought this would be a turnaround opportunity for them. And so you can imagine like what that would look like. There were some expulsions that I remember, and, I'm not going to like go into details, but one thing I will mention is certain members of the administration got fed up. And when kids would screw up, it was not uncommon for them to load the kids in the van and drive them out to like Peanut Lake, which is like a couple miles outside of Crested Butte, and just drop them off and say, you got to get back to town on your own. And these kids are just out there in the middle of winter. It's like below zero and they don't even have a jacket. And that was kind of like a little bit of the discipline MO, but drastic times call for drastic measures kind of deal. But it was a pretty incredible experience to go to a school like that, where a lot of the teachers were out of their grad programs at whatever cool, like all the way on the East Coast, like Colby or, some liberal arts school. And they were big into skiing or kayaking. And they came in with all this energy, and we really benefited from that. And I was so lucky to have the high school experience I did.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm stoked to have Thermic back on the podcast as a sponsor. Because when temperatures get nuclear cold, I don't hit the mountain without my Thermic heated socks. They are the original heated sock, and still the industry leader after 20 years. It's a total game changer. We all know that if your feet are frozen, you're not skiing or snowboarding at your best. And if you are, you're suffering through it. I make sure that never happens by always wearing my Thermic socks. Thermic's game-changing smart elastic technology heated socks are our world's first. These SET socks are a high-performance fitting, thin ski sock, where the patented heating components have stretch instead of a bulky band and element. So you literally feel like you're wearing your normal favorite pair of performance ski socks. But if heat isn't for you, don't worry. Thermic has you covered with socks for winter with their athlete-tested and proven Descent line of socks. This is the #1 recommended sock by boot fitters in North America because for over a decade, Descent has engineered performance socks to eliminate things like chafing or heel blisters in your boots when you're touring or splitboarding. Descent socks have a distinct locked-on fit that never seems to change, no matter what you get up to. At the end of the day, Thermic and Descent socks are the go-to socks for the people that know. Drop into your local boot fitter and retailer and you'll see what I mean. Next up, it's outdoor research. And if you're not aware, there isn't an outerwear brand on the market that performs as well as the products that OR has been putting into the marketplace for over 40 years. That's what happens when you test your gear in the soggy, cold, often miserable conditions that the Pacific Northwest delivers on a yearly basis. As we know, days in the mountains are always more fun when you're warm and dry, and that's why people trust OR to deliver time and time again. Plus, the styling of OR's winter products the past few seasons reflect years of working with a team of snow athletes that include the legendary Mark Abma, world champion Troy Podmilsack, and X Games gold medalist Zoe Aitken. So they worked with engineers and designers to create pieces that look as great as they perform. And for me, I'll tell you, on cold days, I live in my men's Snow Crew down jacket. It's hands down the warmest jacket I've ever owned. And then for the standard Northwest days, I rock the Snow Crew jacket and pant. They're sick. One of those fits where if you don't see me ski, I look like a pro. Really, I've been loving OR products since I bought my first OR rain jacket when I moved to Seattle in 2000. I wear their products during every season nowadays. If you want to be warm, dry, and look cool this season, head on over to outdoorresearch.com and check out the new line of gear. My final sponsor this round is Stanley. And sure, you used to know Stanley for keeping your grandpa's coffee hot in that signature green water bottle. Well, they still make that iconic bottle, but Stanley is the talk of the world these days. And while they may have started with the Powell movement, oh how they have grown. Nowadays, icons like Messi and Caitlin Clark and Post Malone and Olivia Rodrigo are all swearing by their Stanleys. And I've been telling you about how incredible their products are at keeping your drinks hotter and colder than anyone else for over 8 years now. I mean, Stanley invented the category in 1913, and they're constantly innovating to make sure that you have the best. And I know I love having the best. Lately, I've personally been drinking more water than ever thanks to my Stanley Quencher. And when I go to the mountain, I've integrated Stanley food storage devices into my ski routine instead of buying that $20 burger. But I have to say, my all-time favorite Stanley products are their pint glasses, which I've used every day for 8.5 years or so. Like millions of people out there, I love all my Stanley stuff, and I want you to get on the Stanley program too. They give me their best discount code available, so you get 30% off of all your products, and to do that, you head on over to stanley1913.com and you go shopping, buy a ton of stuff because you're going to get 30% off of it when you check out and use the code Powell2025. So that's all capitals, Powell, no spaces, and then the numbers 2025 2025. That's going to get you 30% off your Stanley products. Those are my sponsors. Now it's time to jump back into the podcast. Ski racing wise, you are a nationally ranked racer and you placed top 5 at some big race. And I know there was expectation from you early on, but it didn't totally pan out. And I mean, that happens with ski racing. But did it get to a point where it wasn't fun anymore? And did you have like an I quit moment?
Yeah, it's funny because I'm sitting here in my office at the National Ability Center in Park City, and today on our campus, we call it the Ranch, we hosted the Wasatch Outdoor Industry Summit. So I'm actually looking out the window. There's all these outdoor industry people milling around. Keynote speaker today was like an Olympic medalist skeleton racer, and she told her personal story of the theme of the summit is anti-fragility. And so she was telling her personal story about getting hit by a 4-man bobsled after a training run right before the Torino Olympics, and what that did to cause her to have to reframe her expectations for her life. I had something somewhat similar happen.
I was going to bring it up, but you go ahead with it.
Yeah. So I was like ranked in the top 5 in the country for my age. I might have been like 15 years old, and we were doing like a speed camp in Crested Butte, and it was like after the morning training session, and we're all just like ripping like super G turns down to the base. And one of the kids on my ski team was out in front of me, and I thought he was like increasing the radius of his turns and like opening it up. But then all of a sudden he just starts cranking tighter turns, and we ended up like getting mingled up, and we collided at high speed. And I ended up injuring my knee. It wasn't a full tear or anything, but it was enough to where it like derailed my junior Olympics plans for that cycle. And I guess that was the first real setback I had, like physical setback in my life with my sports and with that part of who I was. And, that was challenging and ultimately led me to a place where, I thought about, I was a good ski racer, but what were my prospects moving forward as a ski racer? Did I want to go try to race collegiately? I ended up choosing to hang them up. After my junior year of high school, I hung them up, stopped racing, and started building kickers with characters like Riley Poor and Matt Stupid and, some of these other lokes who were either in Western State or like just local Groms who are younger than me. That year we would just go up to Irwin on sleds or like go build kickers wherever we could, and started throwing flips and just spins and just having fun with skiing. And of course, when we weren't building kickers, we were just skiing the mountain for the fun of it and skiing fast and challenging ourselves, but really just taking a little bit of a different perspective. That was a big deal for me. I had put a lot of myself into my ski racing career, and that was a transition that I definitely had to navigate.
Then when it's time to go to college, you pick Boulder. And are you like your dad? Are you like a total overachiever, getting a 4.0, doing every club, every student government thing and skiing?
Yeah. So I went into the honors program in Boulder, early admission. I wasn't like dive straight in to like student government and that sort of thing, but I definitely took my academics seriously and ended up graduating with like a 3.96 GPA with honors and stuff. And like my whole thing was I wanted to go straight into law school after my undergrad. And so, while all my friends went to go study abroad our second semester junior year, I made probably the foolish decision to stay back in Boulder and like study for my LSATs.
But you were going to go to Harvard Law. It was like, I've got a 396. I'm just going to ace these LSATs. I'll put all my time into it and I'll go into Harvard because you know what? When Jamie Starr sets his mind to something, he goes 110% in and it's going to happen, right? That was kind of the idea.
Kind of the idea. And it wasn't going to be Harvard necessarily, but I felt confident that I would be able to get into like a top 10 law school with my grades and with my test scores the way they were shaping up. But then something crazy happened. The night before I was set to sit for my LSAT in Boulder, I'd come home from like a marathon study session at the library and I was ready to just like chill out, let my brain rest so I could go crush the test. I had been getting like, top scores, 95th percentile scores on all my practice tests. I was ready to go crush. I come home to a suicide note that my roommate had left on like our kitchen table. And it sort of upended everything. And you could say like set my life on a little bit of a different path.
Dude, is he alive?
He's alive.
What an asshole, man. He did that and he's going to have you find it. He's like, you know what? I'm going to write this note. Yeah, it's going to upset so many people when I'm dead, but I know Jamie's going to find it and it's going to fucking ruin Jamie for a while. But you know what? Fuck Jamie.
Yeah, I don't think he was thinking about me.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Sorry. It's like after the fact, I'm thinking about that.
That kind of set my life into a bit of a different course. I went and I did sit for the exam the next day, but ended up getting like 85th percentile, which was still a pretty good score, but like
not for you,
not for me. And so I decided to like take a year off and not apply to law school and moved to like San Diego for a year with my then girlfriend. And like, I worked this part-time job with a catering and event management company. And we did a lot of cool things. Like we would do all the craft services and dressing rooms at the local music venues. And like, I remember one time I was on the hook for setting up Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters dressing room. And I like walk into his dressing room and he's on the massage table. And I had a really funny, cool interaction with Dave Grohl. We would throw parties at Tony Hawk's house back then. Just some really cool things that happened during that year. But ultimately, like, I was drawn back to the mountains and I was drawn back by my academic ambitions. And I ended up going back to Boulder and starting law school at CU Boulder that next year.
In thinking of all your schooling, do you have to pay for it all or does your family pony up? Because you probably have like $500,000 and maybe not that much, but pretty close to that in just college, I would think, by the time law school's done.
Yeah, so we're talking in-state tuition in the 90s and early
Oh, yeah,
aughts.
that's true.
And so it was relatively affordable. So like my parents were able to pay the $2,500 of tuition for my undergrad semesters. And I was able to get through that phase without any debt. But I basically like put myself through law school on loans, like low interest loans, and then credit cards. I used credit cards to put myself through law school.
All right. So it's something that you had to do yourself. So that's pretty cool that you were able to do it and it kind of paid off in the long run. And if we had a longer podcast, I would talk a lot more about you writing with Josh Spear. But it seems like you did that like in college and out of college. And you could have moved to New York City with him because he started some firm there and is doing really well or probably killed it there. But you didn't want the New York City life. But what I'm trying to say, I guess, is you're a proven wordsmith. You wrote for Josh. You wrote for the Huffington Post. You wrote for ski magazines. And then you were doing legal work on the side for like a decade out of law school. Is that kind of what you did?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, and we can't go into it. Like that's a whole other like sit down. But yeah, I started the thing with Josh and sort of my writing career and continued immersion in the brand space and snow sports industries, kind of coming out of my childhood in Crested Butte. Like there always was like one foot in that world for me. So even as I went to law school and emerged and like had sat for the bar exam and then was waiting for my result, a lot of my classmates from law school had already had their jobs with law firms lined up and they knew exactly what they were going to do. And my first job out of law school was writing with Josh. And he was one of the first bloggers out there in terms of like kind of that lifestyle, you can call it like cool hunting blog space. And this is before social. And that's how brands found out like, oh, this is a great way to engage with our audiences on the internet, is like through the blogosphere and like developing this two-way conversation. And this is how we can show up authentically and engage. Like all these buzzwords that we talk about now is social. Blogging was the genesis of all that. And so I was at the tip of that spear, and no pun intended, working with Josh Spear. And we did a fair amount of like brand consulting work during that time too, where like Fortune 100 CMOs and other leaders from really well-known lifestyle brands would fly us to cool places and want to talk to us about how do we do this? How do we become part of this movement to like authentically engage with our audiences online? And that was, again, like a really foundational chapter for me in terms of the work I would ultimately go on to do in the brand space. And then Josh moves to New York. He had a really awesome offer to go start an agency there. And the guy has become, quite successful. He's a super interesting guy, and there's a whole other story there. But I ended up staying back in Colorado. I ended up like trying a few different roles as a lawyer and bounced around for like 5 or 6 years, just trying to like find the right niche for myself. And I just, unlike my dad, who I think found the right balance for himself with the legal profession, I just didn't. I worked a lot with like early stage tech entrepreneurs coming out of like the tech incubator, Techstars in Boulder. I worked with cannabis businesses when Obama had first taken office. And so it was fun to like support clients who were either trying to solve real problems in the world or just like build cool things and be entrepreneurs. But like my heart wasn't in that enough for me.
And it wasn't your passion either. I mean, it wasn't like you were smoking weed 24/7. Like, I love this marijuana, right? It's like, no, a second win for the guy who has been put down his whole life, but it's not what drives me.
That's right. And like my truth and like what is really at the center of what gets me excited in life has always been the mountains. And it's a direct byproduct of, my upbringing and where I come from. But like that has always been like my center of gravity is nature and the mountains, and through skiing and being on snow and riding my mountain bike and getting on top of a peak and running across a ridge. So that's eventually why I ended up in the outdoor industry. It was my attempt to like marry my desire to like help people and have an impact on society, but also center it more on what I was passionate about.
Well, how did you find Spyder? Because I'm sure they weren't like, hey, we need a team manager, and our team manager is definitely going to have a legal degree. Because you get in there for team and marketing, and did you just go find that and you're like, hey, I'll step down a little bit, suck it up, and just do something I love?
Well, it's funny because it wasn't like step down. Like I ended up in a role that I was arguably underqualified for because I had never had like a marketing role with a brand, and ended up as a marketing manager for Spyder, which at the time was a big brand. But it's funny, like Lily was also formative in that experience because she was a co-founder of Aspen Fashion Week back then. So like she's made a whole career in academia, and her field of expertise is public health. But, she's from Sun Valley, Idaho, and like has a fashion background a little bit, and co-founded Aspen Fashion Week. So she got to know some of the brand leadership at Spyder. And so I got sort of like loosely connected to some of these folks through her. And I remember when I prepared my resume for that role and had that conversation, I knew I needed to like over-index on like the creative side, and the Jamie as a skier, and the Jamie as the understander of like what authentic presence in this brand space is, because I was born in it and grew up in it, and I didn't want to over-index on my legal background. And so I remember putting together like a creative portfolio that sat beside my resume that had like a lot of my writing samples from my Josh Spear days and some of my gear roundups from Snow magazine, which still exists to this day in Aspen. And I remember putting like links to my Vimeo of videos that I had edited of like my friends and I shredding and riding mountain bikes. And it was, again, like in the nascency of social media, but I just wanted to paint that picture that I understood this whole ecosystem and I could thrive in this role. And you get a team manager who is a lawyer. And I think that was a benefit too.
Nice. Nice. So with Spyder, you were there for a couple years. What were the big wins that you had there?
So it was cool because I got to learn. It was a great learning opportunity.
Action Sports College?
It was Action Sports College. And you know what that looks like, right?
Yep, totally.
Coming up in K2 and just being privy to the big show. And we were partnering with the US ski team at the time. And I just remember like at the lead up to the Sochi Olympics, collaborating a lot with US ski team athletes who were on our athlete team. Steven Nyman is an example, and he's someone who's become a great friend here in Park City. And Steven and I remember like going out and like testing our new speed suits and like specialized cycles like wind tunnel in Morgan Hill, California, and going to like the low speed wind tunnel in San Diego where a lot of aeronautics things are tested, and really like figuring out this like innovation meets brand collision, or the Venn diagram of like those the two things coming together and how to build brands through the innovation proposition. I think that was a big learning. And then another learning was just like I was hanging out with people like Tommy Moe and Darren Ralphs and Chris Davenport, who had already made names for themselves and were in the mature parts of their career. You know, it's funny because now Dav recently took a role with DPS Skis.
Yep.
And I used to be Dav's team manager at Spyder, and now Dav's my team manager at DPS. And it was just like kind of this time in the ski industry where come up with a creative idea and like run with it. And we still had pretty good budgets back then. And a lot of creative ideas were able to come to fruition, and we were able to like do cool things with our brands and build our brands that way.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm starting this one out with Elan Skis. Now is the time to think about buying your new skis for the season. And if you've been listening to me talk about how Elan has built a cult following around their hand-built skis made from the highest quality materials, built at one of the most sustainable factories on the planet, all coming out of the Slovenian Alps, then you know that Elan also makes luxury yachts when they aren't making those amazing skis. And they cut no corners to create incredible products that has made me and will make you a better skier. And it's not just the fit, finish, and materials that make Elan better. It's that they're innovators. And while they've been innovating for a long time, the big one that comes to mind in my head is the invention of the SCX ski in the 90s that totally changed skiing. It was the shape ski that made everyone else build shape skis, and it was all about making skiing easier and more fun, and millions of people felt the carve for the first time thanks to Elan. Well, while my daily drivers have been the Ripstick and the Playmaker, this year I'm stoked to ski the Primetime. It's time for me to bring back that carving feeling, and this season I'm going to make it a point to spend more time carving up the front side like a Thanksgiving turkey on my brand new Primetime 42 Pluses. What are you going to add to your quiver this year? I recommend finding out over at elanskis.com. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing, and now is the time to think snow. And skiers, snowboarders, weekend warriors, tubers, sledders, snowbikers, snowmobilers, snowshoers, sled doggers, shovel racers, snow angel makers, ice skaters, snowball fighters, igloo builders, you get it. The doers of winter are starting to get ready to shred, and post-shred, it's all about après. And this year, do après the right way. Forget about the calories, forget about the alcohol, forget about not taking more runs on the mountain, forget about getting in trouble on the way home, because with a beer from Best Day Brewing, you don't have to worry about any negative consequences, just incredible flavor. Blind taste tests prove that you won't be able to taste the difference between a Best Day and your favorite beer with alcohol. The only difference you'll notice is how good you'll feel in the morning, and you're going to remember what you did last night, which is almost refreshing as a Best Day itself. To celebrate your best day yet, next time you're at the store, pick up a 6-pack of Best Day. Or you can always buy it on your Alaska Airlines flight, Amazon.com, or head on over to bestdaybrewing.com to get the full assortment of Best Days. Those are my sponsors. Now, let's jump back into the podcast. I mean, when you think about it, there weren't 100 brands that you were competing with in sales. I mean, there wasn't anything DTC. There was like 5 major brands out there. In ski, Spyder was one of those major brands, you know, and the North Face wasn't at that point. They were in and out, it seemed like, but Spyder had their foothold in skiing. So it was like not having cable TV. You had 4 channels to buy from, and every brand had huge marketing budgets. And yeah, you could buy land yachts and do so much stuff. So you've got
Yeah.
so much at Spyder that you're able to learn. And then next up, you head up like it's 4 European brands. I think it's Dynafit and Pomoca, and there was you can name the brands, but
yeah, the Oberalp group. So it's Dynafit, Soleva, which is a 90-year-old mountaineering brand out of Bolzano, Italy. Wild Country, which is a really cool British climbing brand. They invented like the Friend, like the cam. And then Pomoca, which is on the scene now in a real way in North America. They make the best skins in the game. And so, yeah, I got an amazing role. This is a European family-owned group of brands headquartered in the heart of the Dolomites in northern Italy. Dynafit's HQ was in Munich. And I was responsible for growing all of these brands in North America. So yeah, we were in Boulder. We have an office that did sales, marketing, and operations for all those brands throughout North America.
And it was a time in skiing where every brand was trying to push people out of the resort gates and into the backcountry. And so K2, Salomon, everybody's putting all this money into it. And for you guys, are you able to kind of ride that wave of marketing dollars that they're spending and being like, hey, we're doing this too, but we're just more authentic?
Yeah, I think that was part of the strategy. It was also a challenge, right? Because we knew that those brands that you mentioned had a greater share of voice in North America, and we were this sort of like niche Euro brand. And so we knew that we needed to do things differently to, establish a trust with our customer as being like the brand and the technology that had been around the longest. And so you should trust us the most. I remember racing marker to the distinction of the first DIN certified pin based tech mining. And there was some weird like administrative reason why they technically got it first, but we functionally had got it first. And it was this arms race within the tech mining market in North America to like establish dominance. And to be honest, like we were small, so we didn't actually have that many resources to work with, but we had some firepower in our public relations engine. Eric Henderson, Hendy, who many of you know, was running our PR, and he's an absolute beast and was able to capture a huge share of voice for us in that media landscape of being the best, being the trusted. And yeah, that was a really fun, call it 4 years as well, working with those brands.
So I'm sure you're traveling overseas a lot just to go to different meetings and see what's going on and then bring that back to the US. But is it ever a challenge working with the Euros and like, hey, I know you guys love this colorway and this, but it's not going to work in our market? Or was it easy to just take what they did and bring it over here?
I think you know the answer to this question. Yeah. Partnering with the Euros was at once like one of the most amazing, fulfilling things that I've done in my career, and also like super challenging in terms of taking a brand that has been built in that territory. And again, people say Europe, but really realistically within Europe, there's like a million different cultures and territories. And so trying to harmonize a brand presence and visual brand assortment across colorways, trying to harmonize that for a global audience is very challenging. So yeah, it was challenging. And from a marketing messaging perspective, they would hand us off assets that were beautiful, but they were fit for consumption in Bavaria and not in free ride USA. And so we worked with athletes like Cody Barnhill and Jamie Laidlaw to create some like North American specific skis back then. And Hoji was in the mix with us, helping innovate our products for more of like that free touring or free ride application. And yes, you can still ski on pin bindings, but you can ski your ass off. I mean, just watch Hoji.
Yeah, totally.
We leaned into that opportunity and tried to earn the trust of our European leadership and European colleagues to like move those initiatives forward. But there was definitely always that tension. And I would say for the most part, it was a healthy tension just because they're amazing people and we developed great trust. So
awesome. Your next move, you get hired as the VP of marketing for DPS. And is that when you make the move to Park City?
Yeah, that's what got us to move to Park City. And at that point in time, we were living in Denver. And for many years, we were really good at getting up at the ass crack of dawn and getting up to the Berthoud Pass before the traffic really started so we could get our backcountry laps in. And feel like we were mountain people all the while we're actually living in this massive city that isn't really close to the mountains at all. And we're building our careers and we're commuting all the way around the thing. And, having our first kid really caused us to think about where we wanted to be. And we knew that needed to be closer to the mountains. So when I struck up a conversation with Stefan Drake from DPS at a trade show, that conversation sort of snowballed into an invitation from him for us to come out to Utah and for me to become a VP of marketing for DPS.
And so you do that for a couple years, and it's like you have quite the life, I would think. You're building a growing brand, you're building your family, and you're skiing a shit ton, I would think, because you're right in the mountains finally again. And you have everything in the palm in your hand. And then a year and a half later, what made you even look at the North Face opening? Was it one of those dream jobs that you had to explore, even though you already had a dream job?
Yeah, but that story is a little bit deeper too, and I'll try to do it concisely. Yeah, I mean, moving to Utah was amazing. It was a different zone. I had had a taste of the Wasatch at times during my career, and I'm a powder princess. I explained how we had snow growing up in Crested Butte. We had a lot of snow, and it was kind of the perfect situation for me, like super accessible skiing as a parent of a young kid. And we were really stoked. But my dream job had been that I ended up in at the North Face. And it was actually a role that had been offered to me earlier, like back when I was still with the Oberalp brands. It had been offered to me after honestly, a number of years of communication and networking with top leaders at the North Face. I remember Steve Rendell and Scott Mellon would come to my booth at DNFit, and we would just rap about the newest innovations and the new boot and the new binding, and just developed a rapport with those guys and stayed in touch so that they're like, you should come run sports marketing for us and oversee our athlete team and help us figure out how to best plug the athletes in with the brand from a marketing perspective and innovation perspective and internal cultural perspective. And I was super stoked on that. But when they first offered me the role, it was literally in an email. I got the offer from VFHR in an email as we were on the way to the hospital to have our first kid. They were still in the Bay Area, right? And we're in Denver. The last thing I'm going to do is move us to the Bay Area for this job when we're trying to figure out how to be parents and have our first kid. So I sort of reluctantly turned that first offer down. And then, as many might recall, TNF and a lot of VF brands and the HQ ended up relocating to Denver, which is where they are now. And so that happened about a year later. And so the conversation came back onto my radar after we had moved to Park City, but the brand North Face was in Denver. And I ended up taking it that second time around, sort of on this premise that we'll figure out your location and what relocation might look like, but we're stoked to have you in this role. And I hit the ground running with them in 2019.
Oh, so it's right before the pandemic?
Bingo. So that sort of segues into the next part, which is you hit the ground running with the brand in October of 19, and then everyone knows what happens in the spring of 2020. The pandemic rears its ugly head. The world freaks out. Everyone's at home, quarantine. We start having daily war room meetings with all of the leadership at the North Face, just trying to figure out everything, not the least of which, how we were going to show up as a brand during this time and what we were going to do with our athletes and everything else. So it really caused us to pivot and reimagine. And it's funny because I think our best work during my time there came out of that time, out of this necessity of everyone coming together, putting our heads together and figuring out how to weather the storm.
And when you go to the North Face, I mean, you've wanted to do good your whole career, but it's not like DPS and a lot of these other brands have a big pillar that they're saying, hey, we're going to do good with this pillar, because they're still fighting for market share and trying to stay relevant in an industry where the North Face is a behemoth in an industry and they do good things. And was it the first time that you were able to ever have money to spend to do projects that made you feel good about yourself?
Yeah, I would say at scale, yes. And, scale can mean impact. I had done some small things, I would say meaningful things, to give back to sort of the community and build community and support nonprofits in this space and, be part of the solution of climate change in my earlier career through my various brand roles. But yeah, the North Face brand platform was much bigger, and there was an earnest desire during my time there to, really focus in on that brand purpose. So yeah, I'm proud of a lot of the work we did as a team during my time there to, leverage that brand platform. But ultimately, there are very real limitations to what you can accomplish when you're accountable to shareholders and you need to make that financial number increase quarter after quarter.
So it is still corporate, even though the North Face, it kind of makes it feel like it's, we're out athlete driven and this and that. But behind the curtain, it still is like, hey, we need to still be 25 or 10% up next year. And if we don't hit our numbers, well, we're going to slash that campaign for the kids because they're not going to be spending money.
I mean, yeah, if you're a business, you have to make money. And if you're a shareholder owned business like PNF and VF, or if you're a PE owned business, the profit motive and the financial performance is paramount. I think the question thereafter becomes, is the leadership aligned with this idea that brand has an important role to play in important causes, whether they be cultural causes or sustainability causes? And is that part of the recipe of being successful long term? Because my belief has always been that the brands who will last and brands who will weather those market cycles are the brands that are showing up the right way in their communities and giving back to society just as much as they're putting that money in the bank and giving that money back to shareholders. So I would say the leadership at TNF during my time there largely was aligned to that as where we should be as a brand. And yeah, I think that enabled us to do a lot of great work.
And then giving back to the community and different programs is one thing, but to athlete and sport is a totally different thing. I think you were responsible for a lot of the athlete things, and the North Face has like 150 different athletes that they pay, which is pretty incredible. And then they do these crazy like athlete summits. So did you ever have to organize an athlete summit?
I did. Yeah. So the North Face has about 150 athletes on its global athlete team.
All paid. 150 people make money being an athlete?
Yeah. And some of them make a lot of money.
But if you average it out, they'll make a lot. Would mean average salary would probably be 30 to 50 grand if you do the whole 150?
Yeah, maybe if you take out the outliers and look at what the average is.
So we're talking about a $10 million athlete budget just for salary.
Yeah, right around there.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so there's a lot of resource there, but it is also like, how do we partner with the athletes in the right way? And how do we enable them to do what they do as professional athletes and make that an additive thing to what we want to do as a brand and align those things? And how do we make the athletes part of our innovation roadmap and involve them in product development? And how do we fire up our base of associates who work at the brand by bringing the athletes into the fold and not treating them as an outside partner, but treating them as part of the family? That was hard to do during the pandemic, as you can imagine, but I did everything in my might to find a way. And coming out of the pandemic, I'll never forget the opportunity to, plan and host that athlete summit we did in Bishop, California in November of, I think, 23. And it was snowing in early November in Bishop. And some of us brought skis and went to Shred Mammoth. But it was at once like a challenging week, not only for the weather reason, but also because we had recently lost Hillary, who was a beloved colleague and friend and captain of our athlete team. And so it was our first opportunity as a team to come together and process through that together. And so it is also the first time we had come together after the pandemic. So it was like this very dynamic week. I remember, a lot of celebration and a lot of just being together and telling stories and being outside and doing activities. And we partied a fair bit that week just to process through loss. And to a lot of these folks, they are no strangers to loss. It's part of the program, unfortunately.
When you think about brand losing important athlete, I always think, there's so many different examples, but I think about Shane McConkey. And while I don't know any details, Red Bull's a private company, I believe. And when Shane died, I think his daughter was like 2 or 3 years old. Like I said, I don't know 100% the details, but I know Red Bull did something for Shane and Sherry and Ayla just because Shane was a pivotal athlete for their brand in North America, and those people loved him so much that they wanted to make sure that his were taken care of. When something like happens in a corporate company like VF, is there any room to do anything for an athlete that dies like that? Or is it kind of like, no, this can't hit our line sheet every year?
It was a very impressive response by TNF and VF leadership, if I'm honest. I mean, starting from the very moment, I remember it was 5 a.m. and I get a call from Conrad Anchor, and I answer the call, and he tells me there had been an accident and Hillary was missing. And that very day, like 3 hours later, one of the VF jets had been scrambled from Centennial, Colorado, outside of Denver, had already flown to Bozeman to pick Conrad, continued on to pick me up in Salt Lake. And we were back at HQ in Denver to like go into a bit of like a war room. We got to figure this out. We got to, put the pieces together. And from that point forward, like every step of the way, all the leaders at that enterprise were super supportive of the athlete team, Hillary's family, just the whole thing. It was a big system of support that was activated, and I believe it was handled really well. And I got to be honest, I lost my shit. Conrad was super emotional, and as you can imagine, it was just a really tough time, and there were some clear heads in the room, and that was really helpful as well.
Well, it's nice when a brand handles things the right way. It sounds like they did there, and they're a corporation, so it's not always going to happen that way. But what does happen in corporations is people shift jobs. I think a new CEO came in there or something happened and they wanted to shake the bag. And that's when you end up losing your job, right? It's just someone came in, you didn't really know them, and they're like, we don't need this position.
Yeah. And again, like with these reorgs or reductions in force or rifts, whatever you want to call them, that's the hardest part is they don't discriminate really. They have nothing to do with the performance of the person or the performance of the team. In this case, we're talking about a scenario where the North Face itself had really excelled during my 4 years there and was actually over-indexing on its performance and was picking up a lot of the slack that was there because of some of the challenges.
Dickies.
Yeah, the Dickies and the Vanses, right? Like TNF was contributing more than its share back into the enterprise. But like I said, these things don't discriminate. And yeah, there was that fateful day where I got a call and I was on that list, and it was a really tough one to process. And if I'm honest, I'm probably still processing it to some extent these days.
No, you could tell earlier when you were talking about it, it was like, I wanted to talk about backcountry, which we really don't even talk about anymore. And you want to talk more about the North Face because you were like a little bit bitter. I mean, I guess if your dream job and then just someone else comes in and shakes the bag and you end up without a job, then you probably aren't that fond of that person, but you also realize that it's business, whatever. We talked about you not having a gig for a while and how that's frustrating, but really you landed where you're supposed to land. I mean, you're with the National Ability Center. And when you think about that place, like their whole thing is making a difference in people's lives. So you are where you were supposed to be. It just took you a long time to get there.
Yeah, totally. And, the reason I joined the brand space to begin with was I believed with the right leadership and by doing the right things in the world, brands can be huge vehicles or levers for good. And there's some good examples of that. Patagonia is the one that gets mentioned the most from the outdoor industry. So there's another sort of red thread that's run through my life since law school, which is during law school, my emphasis was natural resources law. CU Boulder is one of the best, if not the best, natural resources law program in the country. And during my time there, I had found an internship for myself at Western Resource Advocates, which has been around at this point for 35 years. And it's environmental policy organization that addresses climate change and its impacts in the American West. So I had a taste of their work in law school. And when I was at DPS, so even before my time at TNF, it kind of came full circle, and I was invited to join the board of directors for this amazing nonprofit organization. It's like huge honor. They wanted more outdoor industry representation on the board. So they tapped myself and Kim Miller, who's the CEO of Scarpa. And I'm in my second term, and I'm on the executive committee of the board and just have this awesome opportunity to help shape the future direction of this super important org that's doing great work in the world. So as my backcountry role fizzled and I was thinking about what I was going to do next, I really felt like, hey, this could be the opportunity for my day job to really recenter directly toward a great mission, because doing it through a brand and all of the red tape and politics has real challenges. So, hey, maybe I can have a bigger impact and add value to an org that really has a clear mission. And that's what the National Ability Center has. I mean, we're in our 40th year right now, and we are impacting amazing amounts of lives through adaptive recreation here in Park City, also through our facility down in Moab, Utah. I don't know if people know this, but 1 in 4 Americans lives with a disability. There's about 60 million people in our country who live with disabilities. We served about 6,000 of those people last year. And granted, there's a lot of great adaptive orgs out there doing great work. We're one of the bigger ones, but just think about that for a second. We served 6,000 and there's millions. So we just view our opportunity for building upon our mission and expanding our mission as a really great one as we look forward to 2034 is an important moment as the Olympics and Paralympics will come back to Utah. So I hit the ground running about 4 months into my role here at the NAC, and we are building the foundation for national expansion and growth, because despite our name of being National Ability Center, we mostly address and work with participants here in Utah and regionally, and we think there's a massive opportunity to scale nationally. And so far, I've just really enjoyed getting to know this organization and all of the amazing people who show up here every day. It's just an amazing family and an amazing culture. And I feel like, to your point, like I'm home. So it's been great.
All right. Well, enough rainbows and compliments and everything that you're just throwing out there. Let's get to some inappropriate questions, because that is our podcast.
Cool.
And you are the most do-gooder guy that we've ever had on the podcast, probably with the best education of anybody that we've had on the podcast. Although I think there was someone recently who had a better one that I talked about that was more Ivy League, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Boulder's pretty good. But I was able to get someone to do the inappropriate questions this week that knows you probably better than anybody, because he is your brother. I think he works over at Google, so he's an overachiever, but not as much of an overachiever as you are. He did not get his black belt. He drank champagne at a wedding when he was 6 years old and told his parents that he didn't want to do karate anymore, and he didn't have to. But we are going to go to Brendan Starr's first inappropriate question, and here we go.
Jamie, it's your brother, Brendan. Just wanted to let you know that I have always looked up to you and really admire how passionate you are for the outdoor industry and the mountains, and it's something that I really appreciate. And I also want to thank you for being the only ski sponsor I'll ever have. I wanted to ask you a couple inappropriate questions. Could you tell us a little bit about a game you like to play? I think it's called Not My Town.
Oh, I thought he was going to say hide the finger, but we can go Not My Town.
Well, I guess Not My Town could end up in the game that you mentioned, Mike. This is funny because years ago when Digi Dave started working in marketing at Aspen Ski Co., we would go and just rage and party so hard. And like the last big hurrah was my bachelor party there. Digi was definitely part of that too, but it was always just tongue in cheek. Something we said when we traveled to a different ski town of like, oh, we can let loose a little more here because people don't know us. Let's go play a little game at Not My Town. And it was just kind of like license for the friend group to just like let loose a little bit extra in a foreign ski town, because the word wasn't necessarily going to get back to your parents.
All right, so that's Not My Town. I like it. We're going to go to question number 2.
Jamie, you've always been a bit of an overachiever, so it was pretty tough thinking about inappropriate questions for you. But I will say you have a bit of a track record being truant from school, and it has to do with skiing. Do you mind telling us about that?
I mean, maybe like taking powder days in high school. I wouldn't call it like truancy if that's what he's talking about, because we had a 6-inch rule, and the headmaster of our high school would send a robocall out to all the students and families if there was over 6 inches and say, hey, today's a powder day, go shred. but I don't know if it was truancy. It was just what we did in Crested Butte as kids. If it snows, you go ski.
All right. Well, I like that. That's a pretty cool 6-inch rule from the headmaster. That's Inappropriate Questions. That's the podcast. And your life and times are kind of predictable. I mean, you have this overachieving smart dad and you follow in his footsteps. And I'm guessing there's a nerdy side of you too because of your GPA, the martial arts stuff. But then you have the ski side, which balances you out with the right amount of cool to be welcomed into any circle that you ever enter in. And the nerdy side means that you're always going to add value to wherever you are. So you're not just a silent passenger listening to things, even though you can do that. And when I said you're predictable, kids, anyone can have the career that Jamie Starr has. First, find something that you're passionate about, go out and get a 4.0 throughout school, then get a law degree, get a shit job where you meet famous people, and the rest should fall into place. So that's why it's predictable. But I thank you for sharing the blueprint for how kids can have your amazing life and times. Thank you for your time as well.
Thank you so much, Mike. It has been a pleasure to talk with you. I'm glad we finally made this happen. Just want to leave everyone with this idea that, like, you know, we all have the opportunity to give more back to society and to planet Earth than what we take. And let's all take that opportunity together. And then on a personal note, Mike, you should know that you've been on my mind a lot lately. And I really hope things are going okay for you in your life and look forward to keeping in touch.
So that was the podcast with Jamie Starr. And you know what that interview proves? That it's not just life that's not fair. Work life isn't fair either. I mean, Jamie had his dream job at the North Face, and all it takes is one new executive to come in with a new vision, and even the most talented people in an organization can be left without a job. The good news for Jamie is that he is that smart, and he was able to weather another storm at backcountry before he finally found a place that he really can make a difference at the National Ability Center. That's the podcast. Thank you for listening each week. Please review me wherever you listen, and please support my incredible sponsors who make this podcast happen. They are Thermic, Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.